Okay,
All right, we're recording.
I'm gonna share the primary screen, and then I'm gonna see. Okay, then I'm gonna take this other stuff out the way. If I can figure out how to do that. All right. Okay. All right. So I want to go to the this information here and get rid of this. Okay. So what's happening is that there were two very interesting articles published this week. Can you hear me okay, Brendan?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to talk too loud, but I do want to talk loud enough. Two interesting articles are published this week, and one of our members alerted me to it, but I'm sure he doesn't want me to say who it is. It doesn't matter. One of them was written by a woman named Arushi, and in fact, her whole name is Arushi Sharma Frank, I guess. Anyway, so let's look at what she wrote. So it turns out she wrote something very specifically about the recommendations by a lot of Alliance for Affordable Energy Together New Orleans. So I'm going to change the screen resolution so it shows up a little better. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is Abusha's picture here. So let's see if I can get this to show up. It dropped out of it. What happened to it? What did I do wrong? I did something wrong. Go back to here. Go back to here. Okay. I hit some button. All right, here it goes. I must have clicked on her face and did something. Okay. So titled Batteries, Utilities, Cost Shifts to Understand the Dynamics, Logic, and Need for Grid Policy Transformation in New Orleans. So the title, Grid Policy Transformation, sounds like maybe she's supporting us. But when you actually read what she wrote, she isn't really. So, but because it smells like someone in the Alliance or Together New Orleans packed her with information and wished to find an outside expert to strengthen their hand in the city council, I felt like I needed to read this and ask Kay to give a rebuttal. So first of all,
Sure.
what is it that she said? So she referred to their program as Distributed Energy Resource Program, DERP, and that term is used a lot. And in fact, the first major part of her article is a quote of what is in their submission. And she says, okay, you get a value stack using batteries. You can do demand reduction, voltage and frequency support, deferred infrastructure costs, and outage resilience. Okay. And some module reduction emissions. And here we are. I'm getting rid of that now. So she's actually quoting the proposal. And I don't mind saying the good things about their proposal. It's definitely good. They have batteries introduced in New Orleans and to help support their expansion. I object to the way they're doing it and the fact that they changed the purpose of the proposal. The actual docket, UD 2402, is not called a VPP docket. It's called a DER docket. So they immediately transformed the docket from being a DER docket to a VPP docket, which vaguely distorts the purpose and value and possibilities. But she thinks that, and this is shared by TNO and the Alliance, that we should have a large number of distributed energy resources, but not just those things in general, which include smart meters and batteries under control and solar panels and air conditioners under control. But they want to do it solely with batteries, okay, which is okay, but it's not as general as the docket suggests or opens up for discussion. And she also wants to use settlement funds. And settlement funds means it came from a whole process where one of the assets supported by New Orleans ratepayers, namely Grand Gulf Nuclear Power Plant, underperformed. And so our payments to support that were not returned in a benefit. So a lawsuit occurred and a settlement was reached, and some of that money is up for grabs and maybe can be used to use these batteries. Okay, that's what the settlement fund stuff is. And their proposal is that they want 2,000 customers to buy batteries, 2/3, 3/4 of them residential and 1/4 commercial and commercial and industrial, and or could be city. And their proposal is that um, this would occur over 3 years, and it looks like a pretty vanilla thing, and it seems reasonable that you'd want 3/4 residential and so forth. However, there's quite a few catches in here, but they do claim to offer a good remuneration to encourage people to get involved. So $1,000 per kilowatt of deliverable capacity. And that's not a minor or mean issue, because I have for example, my experience is I have a 4 kilowatt generator, which cost me about $5,000. And so I would get most of the cost of that generator as a rebate through this program. And that's how they would spend some of this settlement money. And the amount of money for commercial is the same, but they're capped at a larger amount. And they would give the low income person a greater cost, not only the 1,000, but another 1,200. So a lot of it would be subsidized. And if it's true that you can put an inverter for $1,000 a kilowatt, which I think is reasonable, then you're actually overpaying and getting poor people involved as well. So we don't have a problem with having batteries. In fact, our opinion is that let's let TNO and AA do their thing, but not use all the money for that purpose, but instead doing something which grid planning, which, by the way, I remind you, in the title of the talk she gave, she actually said, let's do new grid policy. She says, let's do a grid policy transformation, but actually there isn't much of a grid policy transformation in here compared to what we propose. So anyway, she said, okay, you get these benefits, and these are all pretty much quoted from the TNO's proposal, okay? And the credits, the settlement funds are called SERI credits. And let's not get into how they say what it is and so forth, but talk about where her argument is. Her argument isn't about whether AAE's proposal is better than ProRate's. She's just saying lots of good things about it. And what she does do is try to explain why their proposal is better than not ProRate's proposal, but the utilities proposal. So in order to understand that, you have to understand how the docket played out.
Yeah.
So the way the docket played out was everyone was asked to argue, first of all, whether we would have access to these funds that could be used for batteries. And then secondarily, what would you do with it? And everyone argued you could, except for maybe one or two. And Entergy said you couldn't. And they made a strong argument saying that you couldn't do it. And in fact, what happened was, and I'm jumping to the end because it's important to understand what happened here.
Sure. And Myron, I just want to let you know Spaceman Chris joined the call.
Okay.
Just for your own awareness, since you're presenting.
Okay, Chris, nice to know that you're here. So one of the things that the AAE proposed is that the administrator would be an entity designated by the city council. And that's important because that distinguishes it from ENO's proposal, which was they were allowed to submit that way later than everyone else because it was decided, well, they were against everything. And so so they decided, well, if you're going to use SERI funds, this is how we think you should do it. And so the utility came out with a program where instead of it be a third-party administrator, the utility itself would run the program. And this is one of the things that the Alliance is against. And this is one of the things that this woman, Rishi, was explaining why that's a bad idea. So she was focusing on the difference between what the Affordable Energy and Together did, and what the Entergy proposed. And the key thing, so this is a complaint by Entergy regarding the program that was proposed by AAE. So the DIRT proposal seeks to expand the number of participants in ENO's cousin residential battery energy storage program by incentivizing 1,500 and 500, namely 2,000 new customers over a 3-year period. However, they claim that the DIRT proposal would increase the size of ENO's behind-the-meter battery fleet at a significant cost to ENO customers without sufficient demonstrate that these expenditures would be offset. I'm just highlighting this, offset by corresponding benefits. Okay, now this is a key idea in this article that Arisha wrote, because she's saying that the utility is saying there's a cross subsidy. You're letting some people get batteries, but you're forcing everyone to subsidize it. And there is some truth in that, assuming that the SERI funds would be taken out of the pocket of the customers. But of course, the money was already taken out to support the Grand Gulf. And so it's kind of moot. But the more important issue is this cross subsidy? It's certainly real. The question is this out of step with normal cross subsidies in utility regulation? And this is where Kay makes a point that it's different. So, is
actually a great counter argument that Kay would make. I mean,
yeah. So,
has
previously submitted analysis to council that there's a nominal 4.56 million cost shift already happening because net energy metering and community solar. And that comment is actually incredibly bogus. But it's another cost shift that ENO is talking about. And this cost shift, by the way, is associated with the fact that it was proposed in California, and many utilities around the country still believe it. And because they did, it generally shut down net metering in most states, including Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, and about 5 or 6 other states around the country, because there's this bogus argument that the poor people have to support the rich people by giving them retail value for wholesale quantity. But in fact, that only happens when the price of electricity is high and the cost of the retail price is lower than the wholesale price. So it's a bogus argument. But nevertheless, that whole argument is why ProRate was introduced in the first place in 2016. So this cross subsidy argument is a bogus argument. But she makes the point that this cross subsidy issue, this cost shift issue, is actually nonsense, because, and this is where she says it, Entergy's cost shifts claim is not just exaggerated, it's prospective. The $450 million figure they cite is speculative of a 20-year period reaching to 2044, and assumes a static policy environment, et cetera, et cetera. And again, all is happening because net metering systems are actually causing a cross shift, both of which are nonsense. But the real problem isn't that the cross shift may or may not be true, is that there's a much bigger cross shift already going on by the utility itself, namely because the way it runs, because the incentive is based on the incentive that the utility makes to make a profit is based on how much money they spend, because the utility is going to respond to the given opportunity to make money. There is automatically going to be a cost shift. And so, and she says it redirects attention away from the systemic root problems we need to crush around the country, where utility bills rise because the utility makes pressure based on cost recovery. And these system inefficiencies, and Arisha is absolutely right about these things. However, when she makes these points, she ignores the fact that the Alliance for Affordable Energy and Together New Orleans aren't doing anything to fix this problem that's currently being highlighted on the screen. She says the real problem of the cost shift is not caused by net metering or community solar. It's because the cost recovery program is the incentive the utility focuses on to make income. And they don't, they doesn't show any way to fix that. So, and then the rest of the stuff about cross shifts is again on the same subject. So that's fundamentally what her argument is. So what I want to do now is jump up to the other article. As I said, Chris walked in a little bit late. So I was saying that this article by Arushi was published early last week. And I heard about it. And then I asked Kate to write a response. And she did. This is her response. So she wrote about it and she said, again, talking about what is good, namely batteries are good, but batteries are not the full solution to solve the cost shift problem. So, which is what Arushi says she was trying to focus on. So Kay points out that she is a regular participant on behalf of the United Nations environmental programs to promote grid-wise architecture. And she was called in by members of the New Orleans community, including us particularly, to participate in this docket, and she did. And she says it's a well-intended step toward a cleaner and more resilient future, leveraging solar plus battery to create a virtual citywide power plant. And she makes a point of mentioning that what Arushi wrote highlights the need to move beyond the cross shift narrative argued by the utilities. So she's taking up right where Arushi suggestion she was going to discuss it, didn't in fact discuss it. In the post, there is a thorough discussion of the embedded, she left off the word inefficiencies. And I told Kay she made a mistake. This should say embedded inefficiencies in the current utility regulatory model in other countries. And she said, on the contrary, in other countries, such as she left off the in and inefficiency, and on the contrary here, but you have to read between the lines what she meant, such as Australia, which have already made significant strides in re-imaging the future utility model. However, there's no discussion in Arushi's article on how they got to that understanding. A close friend of mine, Mark Patterson, was instrumental in his effort when he worked in the Australia Commonwealth Science and Industrial Research Organization, and you can see the acronym, which I don't know how to pronounce. With the support of the Australian government, they took on a multi-year effort to understand the grid as a complex system through systems thinking lens. So what is system thinking? When you do a system, you say, well, it has a good part, but maybe it has a bad part. And if you don't evaluate the good part against the bad part, you won't appreciate it. So this is the graph that they came up with. And to me, it's very powerful. I'm going to decrease the screen resolution a little bit so you can see the whole image. Okay. So here it is. And you can see that, I don't know if the volume's high enough. Okay. All right. So wait, let me turn this off. Okay. So if you look at this, you see that, let's see, that there is this circle within a circle. And they came up with this graphic to try to explain the real intricacy of grid planning and even suggest that the biggest machine that's been created on the planet is the machine that runs the electric grid all over the world. And she points out the electrics infrastructure is tied like a puzzle piece to the industrial infrastructure, and that is tied like a puzzle piece to the regulatory infrastructure and the networks and the control structure and the digital structure. All these are interrelated and affecting each other, and you can't try to solve one without trying to solve the other. So I asked Kay to send me an explanation of how they came up with this graphic. And I find it tantalizing, namely teasing us, but not explanatory. So I came up with an answer that explains it. And I think this will be easy. So what's the difference between the use of a ductless mini split and a ducted air conditioner? And I think you guys can follow this. So the advantage of a ducted air conditioner is you have one thermostat to control all the cooling and heating in the home, and you don't have to fool around with multiple thermostats. And once you set it, it takes care of the whole home, and your filter and your air conditioner cleans the air for the whole home. And all you got to do is change one filter, and that's great. But it also causes a myriad of problems. So again, we can think about item number electricity is here, and the ducted mini split is like the industry structure. So here's an example. So in a ducted mini split, you have an inside unit in each of, say, 5 rooms where it does the cooling. Well, when the air conditioning cooling is put in the room, it stays in the room it's put in, which you might say, well, that means it's hard to cool the whole house. Well, maybe you don't need the cool house. Maybe you don't need to cool the bathrooms or the utility room, but you definitely need to cool the bedrooms and the kitchen. So you'll put a ductless mini split in each of those rooms. But when you turn on the fan with the ductless mini split, it only has to move air 5 or 10 feet. When you turn on the fan in a ducted equipment, it has to go 50 feet through the ducts to get from the source of the cooling to the delivered space. That means that you have to run a high fan speed to get the air to go through the ducts. A high fan speed requires, when you have a high fan speed over coil, you decrease the cooling. You decrease the drying in order to get the cooling to occur at a great distance. So you've distorted the ability to do drying because you made it ducted. And because you made it ducted, it's prone to leak cool air into the attic. And because you made it ducted, it's going to prone to pick up heat from the attic. Okay. And because you made it ducted, the filter at the return place in the ducted system has to do all this filtering work. And when it gets succeeds in filtering the dirt, it also fails to allow the airflow. So it gets blocked up. So when you think of the problem, I'm trying to explain how what's good about one thing is bad about another, how these interrelated. By having a ducted system, you generate a lot of problems. And then the ductless system allows you to cool one room without cooling the other, and more dehumidification. It's easier to keep clean. It's easier to control. So it shows how if you make a decision, you can't avoid causing interactions between other solutions. And I just thought that was something.
I have a basic question, and maybe it's because I
Sure.
haven't done any, building science around this particular thing. But is you can have a ducted mini system or a mini split as well, right? I
You
mean,
can add ducts to it.
yeah, like
You
like
can,
mini splits aren't necessarily non-ducted.
yes, they are. That
Uh,
they're called ductless mini splits. That's what they're called.
but
That
there are
doesn't mean,
ducted mini splits as well, aren't
well,
there?
no, they're not. They're not
Oh,
called mini splits. And the reason why they're not is because the cooling element is in the room when it's a ductless mini split. If it's ducted, the cooling element could be in the attic over one room, and that might go to another room. 2 rooms might share one small evaporator, but that evaporator is in the attic, not in the room.
oh,
Ducted
okay.
mini splits, the evaporator is in the room. And so you don't really need a fan to move the air around the room because it's already in the room. Okay.
And
So
does it have to use a fan, or can you use like a pump of some kind, like a heat pump or something to
to do what?
to move the
Well, you can use any fan. There's a little bitty fan in there in the ductless mini split, and I always put it in with the room with the ceiling fan and let the ceiling fan do the air moving. The
uh
reason why I recommend that is because high fan speeds are poor, decrease the ability to dehumidify. And in
okay.
our climate, drying is more important than cooling in
Hmm.
terms for comfort. So anyway, so
You
I,
made
I, I only gave the example of the ducted and the ductless here to try to explain how things are interrelated. When you make a decision on whether it's ducted or not, you decrease your ability to dry and you decrease your ability to control, and you get bigger problems with filtration, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of consequential effects from which seem to be a relatively modest change in air conditioning. And the same kind of thing is happening through this whole process. So what do we mean by regulatory structure in this case? So when you regulate a utility with the standard model, then you pay them for investing. You say, I'm going to give you 10% return on your undepreciated value of your asset. So the utility wants to build things even if they don't need it, because that's how they make a profit. So in the city in New Orleans in 2016 and 17, they were trying to promote a peaking plant, which I argued wasn't needed. All we really needed was a rate design, and it was summarily thrown out because everybody wanted to kowtow to the utility so they could build their peaking plant so they can make money, even though the argument for a peaking plant was really dubious. So if you change the regulatory structure where instead of being paid for investment, you get paid for performance, namely, if you lower the price of electricity, you should be paid for that. If you increase resilience, you should be paid for that. If you try to provide a relatively good price for the poor people and you increase equity, you should be paid for that. All these other goals could be integrated into what you do to encourage the utility to do the right thing.
Do you think
Okay.
the argument could be made, speaking of cross subsidies like you did earlier, could the argument be made that if you're not compensated for it, you're actually subsidizing those who are benefiting from that cost reduction?
Well, here's the thing. So in the case of putting in the batteries, okay, sure, if we think it's good for the city to put in batteries, which we do, okay, then we would argue, yes, it's a good idea, and we should let the utility let this happen. But the main reason why the utility is against it is because these batteries are not going to be owned by the utility. They're going to be owned by the consumers. And if they're not owned by the utility, they don't provide any income to the utility. But if, on the other hand, we change the regulatory structure, which I'm highlighting now in black finger, okay, moving around this thing, so that you get more money if there's better resilience, if there's more equity, if there's lower price electricity, which we can do by having a better rate design and still letting the rate design pay for the batteries, but the batteries aren't owned by the utility. The utility can still get a better rate of return if we're paying them based on performance as opposed to paying them based on investment. So that changes what we do because the utility is going to be all gangbusters and doing whatever it takes for them to make more money. Okay. So that's an aspect of this thing. And this graphic right here is to make the point that these things are all interrelated. Let's talk about control for a minute. So in the virtual peaking plant, or the VPP, that was proposed by the Alliance for Affordable Energy and Together New Orleans, all of the batteries are operated like an orchestra. One person presses the button at the utilities keyboard and turns everybody's battery on and exports its kilowatts of energy into the grid so that the utility doesn't have to buy expensive electricity or can meet an insufficiency of supply to demand, which sounds good. However, it's arguable that they can get the same effect cheaper by just producing a rate design. Because if the rate design there, you can get people to independently respond to these signals. It sounds like it's complicated, but you can actually run an AI bot on your computer, which will then control your water heater and your air conditioner and your batteries. And so instead of just doing batteries, we have all these other assets. And it's also more equitable because poor people don't have solar panels, which I didn't point out to you. If you want to participate in the AAE or TNO proposal, you already have to have solar panels or you can't get batteries. So if you think that's equitable, how many poor people already have solar panels? Okay, even though they get a big subsidy on putting in the batteries, it's not going to work because they don't get solar panels, so they don't have batteries. Also, they don't get any subsidy if they don't join the demand response program the utility runs. And we don't think you need to. You could just have a rate design do it. So all these things affect control. It converts how things work. Okay. So this is why this graphic helps to suggest what she's talking about. So going back to it, and I didn't mean to go there. Let's go back to this.
I was wondering when Kay writes the counter argument or rebuttal, who exactly is she planning on sending it to?
She isn't
sharing with.
This is our opportunity to put her idea. See, notice if you look at this email that I'm highlighting, it was an email that I sent to ProRate and the GNICC. And because I'm a member of GNICC and I'm a subscriber, this went to me and all of their subscribers. So ProRate has like 100 subscribers, and GNE might have 300 subscribers, including all of TNO's people and all of AEC people might be subscribers. So, but the mere fact that I published it, I have made both articles in the purview of all the people who should be our allies on this docket. So that's why I'm discussing it. I'm going back to what she said. So she was explaining that this view of the of grid architecture is really what we're proposing and addresses the very thing that Arisha said she wanted to do in her subject, as a subject of her email, I mean, her publication, but not in the content. She got lost in the weeds or focused on the issue of cross subsidies. And what Kay is saying is, if you really want to meet the cross subsidy problem, you've got to treat all the issues, not just some. So what we need is something, a performance-based resilient energy system so that it reaches all the things. And she wants us to do not just the performance-based regulation, but also to do other things. So this is her sort of short list. So she wants distribution system planning, which includes DERs of everything we talked about, but also electric vehicles and also load flexibility. That means that you use your load at the time the price of electricity is low. So if you have a water heater, you could set your water heater to make hot water when the price is low. For example, in Fort Collins, where they have a time of use rate design, where the price triples if you buy electricity between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m., then you're much smarter to heat your water when you don't do it during peak times. And that's a very simple signal and it has a big effect. So she's not just talking about using batteries or electric vehicles, but all three. She's also talking about the community engagement should equitable and transparent. And she wants to also include dynamic pricing and empowering customers to shift energy use and contribute grid services. But she wants probably, I would say her most important goal is performance-based regulation that ties utilities incentives with what the public wants. The public wants equity, resilience, emissions reductions, and lower prices. If you give us that, we'll give you more profit. And that's one of the things wrong with the proposal. So she talks about it, and you can see it's a very short article compared to what Arisha wrote. So I wanted to put that on the table and stop talking and see if anyone wants to jump in. I know Christopher's there and Brendan, please make some comments.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, Chris, do you have any comments on this? It seems like very specific information. I'm glad you let us know about the Lines for Affordable Energy. I'm glad that they were quoting the docket directly. What website is that? It seems like it was from a website where share what you know or something was where.
Okay, so if we go back to the two websites, the name of the one that that Arisha used, she used her own domain. See, Arisha substack.com. So she has a sub. If you go to there, you'll see that there's a couple of articles written by Arisha on substack.com. On the other hand, Kay decided to post within a website entitled info 8 innovate futures. By putting an 8 there, they're allowed to skip a whole bunch of syllables. I mean, letters in the word. But if you innovate futures is the name of this particular website that she used, and she was able to post there easily. In fact, if you go there, I'll go there one more time, you'll see that Kay has posted other things. And if you get to the very bottom of it, you'll see that she made a recent posting. And this is one of the things I recommend you read, although it's not directly germane to what ProRate is doing, but it's very much matches my view of how we need to be responding to the needs of the planet. So instead of working on everything as if we are the stewards of everything, we should try to work with the planet. if we truly seek a thriving planet, we more than swap fuels. We must reimagine the very systems, economic, cultural, and social, that shape our daily lives in relationship with nature. So we must change how we belong to nature itself, not continue believing that nature belongs to us. And I actually want to interject, although Kay is not a religious person, I see this as a religious issue because I think religion inappropriately presumes that we have dominion, and in the first book of the Bible, we're commanded to be stewards of the earth, but not so much to be in harmony with the earth. And I think it's a mistake. Religion doesn't actually promote the right solution in this case. So anyway, I think this is a very powerful argument about the ethics of planning about how to interact with the natural environment. I don't want to get off on the sidetrack here. So going back to, but anybody can talk about anything you want now. I just wanted to put this on the table. Do Chris or Brendan want to interject something?
I believe Chris unmuted the microphone.
Well,
Are you going to talk? Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I'm not
Chris?
pretty sure what the. Okay, so here's my thoughts. Okay, I read pieces. I guess I'm not 100% sure on the pronunciation. It's fonts. You know,
Can you hear Brendan? I can't hear him.
It's pretty choppy, but
It's pretty choppy,
hang
Chris.
on a second.
Okay.
How about now?
Yeah, it sounds better.
excellent.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so I read the articles. I understand the Alliance for Affordable Energy's perspective. I think Myron and Kay's perspective has a level of validity that actually potentially can accomplish some goals, but it's not. I don't see the political environment weighing the subtleties between the differences as being required at what they're trying to achieve. Okay, it seems like to me that what the Alliance and is affordable energy and Together New Orleans is trying to accomplish is that they're trying to put a model within the system that they can ultimately collect data from and make cases around, and also something to introduce to the people of New Orleans. I don't think they deliberately picked people with solar systems because they're rich. I think they picked them with solar systems, batteries, and the solar systems will work together. The incentives will help, offset some of the cost, and it puts 1,500, little data points together in the first 3 years.
I want to say you're absolutely, Chris, right. And which is why we did not ever argue that we're opposed to what they're doing. All we're saying is they're crowding out all of the opportunity we're proposing. We only want to use 10% of the money to do a study to improve it in these other ways. Not that we want to, it's
Myron,
not an either or.
I'm really familiar with what you're advocating, and I think you're right. Okay, that there is a better use of the money, and I think Kay makes a pretty good case that there's a mechanism here for for providing a pathway towards a better future.
Right.
But New Orleans has no history, not a little history. I'm talking no history of making good long-term decisions.
Right. In fact, it's
Okay.
even worse than that. You're right. Absolutely right. And
Okay.
I want to support you, Chris.
If they have
In
an
fact,
opportunity to make a good decision or a bad decision, they're always going to choose the bad decision. Is based upon my experience. But again, that's just me.
right. Anyway, I want to say that no doubt about it. We can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And there's no doubt that what they're doing is good. And if we try to cause something to happen without the political power to make it happen, we're just going to muddy the waters, which is why, like Dan Weiner said to me a couple of days ago, that he wasn't going to continue to participate in ProRate when he thinks that the winning ship is the one with the most political support, and that's clearly the alliance together and put together New Orleans. But that doesn't mean we can't, argue and explain why this is better, but never ever saying we're not for the other team. So I agree with you. From the very beginning, way back in December, when we were formulating our decision to move in this direction, Chris popped up and say we don't want to be against what the alliance is doing, and we're not. We just don't think that it should be the only game in town. And also, we know we are low in political support, and Press Kavikoff and Kay are working on a whole other set of allies and the ministers to try to be able to bring this, home. So, yeah, I agree. We need to get some wins, and I just feel like I'm not running a team of volunteers who are going to jump up and bring in 10 times as many people who want to do political support in New Orleans. The best I can do is provide a forum to discuss things so we can see what we have on the table. And that's what we're doing, and that's why we're recording this, and that's why we have recorded 5 or so previously, and we will continue to record into the future so we can provide a well-established set of arguments that can be referred to by many to show what we really think is a good policy. So, I mean, I agree with you, Chris. If you can't get it through the door, it doesn't matter how good it is. And so, on the
Okay,
other
so
hand,
I'd like to
yeah, go
hear
ahead.
Brandon's perspective on
Okay.
The 18 to 28 vote.
Mm,
Are they even jointly aware of the regulatory structures that they're operating under?
in terms of those who are politically engaged, it doesn't seem to be a hotbed issue currently. So there's a little bit of disengagement. UNO in particular has a lot of undergraduate programs relating to environmental engineering and conservation.
Uh-huh.
So that, tangentially relates to energy efficiency, right? Or vice versa.
Right.
Energy efficiency tangentially relates to those topics.
So if you want to start.
And, I really think that there are opportunities, as we've done in the past, to participate at conferences and different forums to network, to find more allies, better articulate our ideas. But yeah, I think I like one comment I will make though. You see this often in philosophy, also, but when people give forth positions, they always couch it in more violent terms of, we're rebutting their argument, we're defeating them, we're countering. And I think especially having allies like GNO, ICC, or the Alliance for Affordable Energy, think of it as supplementing their argument. Don't think of it as an alternative to it, or we're defeating them and there needs to be another option. It's more we're going to build upon their solution or refine it and use what influence we do have to make sure that the parts of that solution that we're knowledgeable about and advocating for get included in the solution, right?
I want to interject one more thing. is that the advisors have reviewed the two questions. You might remember there were two questions for this docket. Question one is, does the city council have unabated authority to use the SERI funds in any way they want? And the second one, assuming the answer of the first one is yes, what would you do with the money? But the utility argued that we don't have the choice. The settlement was created in Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and it was specifically asserted that money has to be given back to the ratepayers and cannot be used this way. And the most prominent proponent of that argument was Entergy itself. And so this whole argument about what to do with the money is what money, and that's what the utility said, and that's what the advisors say. So it's not a question what to do with $30 million. It's the question what you do with ratepayers' money. And consequently, any budget based on $30 million is bogus. And the city council then has to decide, do they want to do either or both of the choices? And we're arguing, well, we want to spend $1 million a year, which in retrospect is less than 1/7 of what we pay just the advisors. And the city hero office also spends about half of that. So it's about 1/10 of the money spent on the advisors and hero to do something that would reimagine things. And the idea that maybe we'll get the money to do this battery pilot could be taken out of the demand side management program, which has a $20 million a year budget and is not doing as much as we could do. So these things are alternative choices with choices that the city council will have. And we already know we've made an impact on the council. If you don't mind me going a little further, in the March 25th load shedding disaster in New Orleans, where the utility did not know what to do to meet MISO's demand to shed about 100 megawatts in Louisiana, the city took an undue high percentage of that load shedding, but did it with a machete instead of a scalpel. And we actually had an opportunity to learn from experience in 2021 when the Winter Storm Uri event had a similar effect in New Orleans, and the city council didn't follow through. So we know we have poor planning. So it isn't a question of do we know it. City council knows it. And so that we can piggyback on that opportunity to help bring this home, not to be
Okay,
against what
okay,
the alliance was.
stop, Myron, stop,
Yeah,
just
go
for
ahead.
a second.
Okay.
Okay, so what are we doing to change the prognosis?
Well, in my opinion, what we're doing is we are getting involved in the elections. That's something that you mentioned 6 months ago. So we're getting involved in the elections, not as ProRate per se, because we're not that kind of an organization, but we are participating. I actually had a meeting with two of the city council, people running for city council, and talked to them extensively about what they're doing and why they should be doing A, B, or C. And but they really want some money, and I'm not offering to give them any money, although I think press has. And we also are trying to get together with the ministers to get them to have a unified force on the importance of planning. So that's what we're doing in this political climate of this particular year when the new council is elected before the end of the year. So that helps answer a question, perhaps. I'm Chris. Okay. So we're making arguments and we're doing behind the scenes political organizing, but we're doing it as aid to other people's activities, not initiating our own. Okay. So hope that was responsive to your question, Chris.
It was, I mean,
Yeah.
so what's your prognosis that that's going to be successful?
Okay, well, only because I have some insight, namely, we actually almost not supported, but lent support to two different council for District A. One was a woman named Holly Friedman, and another one is Amy McCarran. And we actually introduced both of them to our database, and so they could participate. Neither one came, but I was able to sit down very carefully with they had of the legislative support for Amy McCarran, who was a guy named, can't remember the name now, it's not popping up. But anyway, and he told me he's all on what's going on in energy matters, and he quoted Natalie Jordy. And I explained to him, well, Natalie Jordy doesn't have our opinion. We are not against what they do, but it's not what we're proposing. And never got back to him. He never got back to me with the meeting, but then I was on the heels of just about to go to Colorado. So I expect a face-to-face in a few weeks after I get back from Colorado. But I also know that press is also organizing with almost all of his ability to help Amy McCarran and another guy named Willard. Well, sorry, I got his, his name is Willard, was one of these, well, the Willard family's been successful in New Orleans. And so I forgot his first name. Anyway, I met with him. And so we are making headway with those people. And I think they are going to follow through. And I think both of them are going to try hard to get on the utility committee, and both of them are going to walk in without, with a decision to participate forthrightly instead of just another thing that they have to do. It's really hard to be a city councilman in New Orleans because you've got to take care of everything you have to do to run a city, potholes and balancing the budget and deciding who's the police chief. And then also have time for utilities, which is a lot of things to do. And the way the city council runs in New Orleans, if you're not the chair of the committee, you're not even encouraged to make a motion. So it's very difficult to really walk in with both feet and both hands into a docket that you can't be in control over. But they making comments and they're suggesting, and because of this political climate, I think the city council has reinvigorated the docket that they created in 2021 to figure out how to do load shedding. And they wouldn't have done it without the pressure from people like us and the white letter that we wrote. So I think we're making an impact. And I hope that answered your question. Okay. Anybody, again, we're almost out of time, so we have time for one more comment. Brendan, you got to say something.
Well, I've been saying stuff throughout the meeting. I mean, I think I've said everything I want to say. I appreciate
Okay.
you having this meeting and bringing up this and being able to share it with others. So,
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I need to get back to being social in Colorado with my
oh
mom.
yeah, I hope the trip to Colorado is doing well. I'll stop the
Yeah.
recording and then we can banter.
Okay.
Off the recording any amount.
All right.